DNA could have been a much greater asset for us in that particular case.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 serial killers who were never caught.
Is the hope for closure for everyone fading?
No.
These women were no longer just random people. You know, they had names. They were people.
34 years is a long time. Not knowing is like the worst part.
For this list, we're ranking the most infamous instances where high-profile serial killers were not brought to justice for their crimes. Did we leave any out? Let us know in the comments. Number 20, the Skid Row Stabber. The first serial killer on our list should not be confused with the Skid Row Slasher, aka Vaughn Greenwood. We're discussing the Skid Row Stabber, who reportedly had 11 victims to his or her name during their rampage in the late 1970s. The crimes all took place in or around Los Angeles' downtown Skid Row neighborhood and targeted the area's substantial homeless population. Bodies were usually dumped or disposed of within various Skid Row alleys, and to this day, no one knows the true identity of the stabber. Bobby Joe Maxwell was arrested, tried, and convicted of the Skid Row Stabber crimes, but the investigation was marred by corruption and circumstantial evidence, resulting in the ruling being overturned in 2010. Number 19, the New Bedford Highway Killer. New Bedford, Massachusetts is known for its thriving fishing industry and for being a setting in Herman Melville's classic work Moby Dick. It's also infamous for having been the hunting grounds of the New Bedford Highway Killer in the late 1980s. The targets were all women with drug dependency issues or who worked in the city's sex industry, and their bodies were all found along major highways in the surrounding New Bedford area.
The hardest thing for me is the families, and particularly the families of the two girls that we never recovered the remains of.
A number of suspects have come up over the years as potential candidates for the New Bedford Highway Killer, including a hypothesis that the Portuguese criminal known as the Lisbon Ripper perhaps could have done double duty after leaving the area.
I'll never give up on her, never.
To this day, families of the victims remain desperate for answers.
I believe someone knows something. I made her a promise I would never give up, and I won't.
Number 18, the Bible Belt Strangler. Also known as the Redhead Murders, the case of the Bible Belt Strangler remains unsolved. The perpetrator of these crimes received the moniker of the Bible Belt Strangler due to the crimes being committed in states like Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Mississippi between the years of 1978 and 1992.
And Jane Doe's bad, because that means you don't know who they are, which means you don't know who their family is, you don't know who their enemies were.
The case bears similarities to the New Bedford highway murders, as the victims were usually either hitchhikers or sex workers, and their bodies were dumped on the side of local highways.
Pretty much he's a white truck driver. I would say he's around 5'11", 6'2", between the ages of his mid-20s to his 40s.
A trucker named Jerry Leon Johns is considered today as a likely suspect in at least one of the murders, but he died in prison before he could be indicted.
Knowing that it's her is a major part, but I don't think that's going to be fully all my closure.
Number 17, the Rainbow Maniac. The Brazilian police dubbed this killer the Rainbow Maniac because he exclusively targeted gay men who visited Paturi's Park in Brazil's Carapicuíba municipality. Authorities actually suspected that the Rainbow Maniac could be a state police officer, with almost every victim being shot multiple times, potentially by the same gun. A retired agent named Jairo Francisco Franco was tried for the crimes in 2011, but he was found not guilty. That was despite witness testimony that Franco frequented the area and was allegedly seen shooting one man 12 times. Number 16, the Paraquat Murderer. Serial killer murders can be premeditated, opportunistic, or completely random. But rarely are they this indirect. The Paraquat murders weren't actually directed at any one specific person, but rather a series of random poisonings in Japan during the mid-80s. Paraquat is a type of herbicide that was used to commit the crimes. The killer spiked drinks that were left in or on top of vending machines in the Fukuyama, Hiroshima area. In total, 12 people died and over 30 additional victims were poisoned by the mixture, but survived. The Japan Soft Drink Bottlers Association wound up printing over 1 million warning labels for the vending machines. Darker still, the unsolved murder spree inspired a number of copycats. Number 15. The Santa Rosa hitchhiker murderer. Hitchhiking isn't a common occurrence today, but it's important to remember that for many years, many people used this method of travel to get where they wanted to go on a budget. Unfortunately, as the victims of the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders tragically found out, you never know who it is that's picking you up.
Get in my car, please.
How come? I didn't do anything wrong.
I'm gonna go down to the police station.
Look, I'd really like to get my parents.
The case is unique for its list of official and potential victims, as well as the laundry list of high-profile serial killers to whom these murders might be attributed. Ted Bundy, the Zodiac Killer, and the Hillside Stranglers have all been named as potential suspects for the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders. But to this day, no definitive name has been linked to the case.
Did you ever know any of these girls?
I've seen their pictures on television.
Never met any of them?
No, never.
Number 14. The Butcher of Mons. We're not sure what's worse about the Butcher of Mons, the brutality of his crimes, or the disturbing skill that went into the surgical destruction of the bodies. The butcher struck the Belgian city of Mons in 1996 and 97 and left plastic bags containing body parts on the side of local roads. There were similarities to the victims' histories in that they all tended to congregate at the local train station and had troubled backgrounds. Their remains were packaged with bright underwear and seemed to be strategically dropped at places with names that translated to evocative phrases like the Path of Worry. Number 13. Bible John. If you dance with Bible John, you may just be dancing with death. This Scottish serial killer tended to target young brunette women at a local dance hall in the city of Glasgow. Sketches and composite drawings paint a portrait of Bible John as a young man, while the official psychological profile references John's apparent puritanical nature. The killer would reportedly quote the Bible and condemn those married women who would frequent the dance hall, equating the act with adultery. The infamous Scottish serial killer Peter Tobin is believed by some to be Bible John, but to this day, there is no definitive connection or answer in the case. Number 12. The Monster of Mangonés. The moniker of monster is disgustingly fitting here. This Colombian serial killer is believed to have been responsible for the murders of at least 30 boys during the 1960s and 70s. The monster's reputation and reign of terror were such that he became something of a terrifying local legend. This was in part due to sadism involved in his methods, which included the use of syringes to extract blood. This led to suspicion that the monster of Mangonés was the closest thing to a real-life vampire Colombia had ever seen. Number 11. The Monster of Florence. Italy has had a number of disturbing serial killer cases go unsolved. Among the most notable was the monster of Udine, while another monster lurked in Tuscany, the Monster of Florence. The crimes were quite similar to the Son of Sam killings in New York City, as the culprit tended to target couples in parked cars. However, the Monster of Florence also removed organs from some victims. A turbulent police investigation followed. The conviction of one suspect, Pietro Pacciani, turned into an acquittal. Yet, after Pacciani's death, 2 alleged accomplices were tried and controversially sentenced to life in prison. To this day, the true identity of the Monster of Florence remains a mystery. Number 10. The West Mesa Bone Collector.
Why does this case remain unsolved after all this time?
On February 2, 2009, the bodies of multiple women were found buried together. They were mostly sex workers and had all gone missing between 2001 and 2005. The gruesome discovery was made by a woman on the West Mesa of Albuquerque, New Mexico, who noticed a human bone while walking her dog. The investigation and excavation ensued, and 11 bodies were found, bringing police to believe the work to be that of a serial killer.
I know who killed her, and I know who did it, and I know why. Okay, bye.
While there have been very few leads, investigators suspect that the killings might be linked to the yearly state fair, which draws large crowds and sex workers to the area. Number 9. The Atlanta Ripper. In 1911, the Atlanta Ripper began his killing streak. By year's end, anywhere from 15 to 21 women's deaths were connected to the murderer, or murderers. The victims of the Ripper were all dispatched in the same way, their throats deeply slit. Each of the female victims was black and in her 20s. However, it wasn't until the 6th murder that police began to consider the possibility of a serial killer. Some speculate that the lack of a lead, as well as racial prejudice of the time, led to the delay of the investigations, and their ultimately being dismissed. While several men were arrested, no charges were ever brought to court, and the case remains unsolved. Number 8. Jack the Stripper, also known as the Hammersmith Nudes murderer.
Can we go now?
We're not through yet.
This murderer appeared and disappeared from the streets of London in the mid-1960s. This maniac earned the moniker Stripper by virtue of his habit of undressing his victims before dumping them. The victims, and 2 other possible victims, were all between the ages of 21 and 30, and frequently bore similar paint fleck marks, which was thought to point to where the murderer worked. However, despite evidence found, no arrests were made. John DeRose, chief superintendent of Scotland Yard, had identified one Mungo, Ireland as the most probable culprit. Unfortunately, around the time a possible link was made to Ireland, he took his own life. The truth of his guilt or innocence died with him. Number 7. The Phantom Killer. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders have spawned several urban legends and films. But in 1946, for the residents of the Twin Cities of Texarkana, Texas, and Texarkana, Arkansas, it was all too real. The first attack came against Jimmy Hollis and his girlfriend Mary Larry, who had parked their car on a secluded stretch of road known as Lover's Lane.
Sammy, move your hand.
Sound familiar? Both survived, though Hollis sustained skull injuries and Larry was assaulted. About a month later, another couple wasn't so lucky. 3 weeks later, 2 teens were shot and killed. After that, a married couple was attacked, but only the husband died. Hollis and Larry were the best lead for the killer's appearance, stating that he wore a white hood. But when the killing stopped, so did investigations. Number 6. The Servant Girl Annihilator.
Occupation. With the exception of the white women, everybody is a servant. 3 of them are cooks.
Between 1884 and 1885, the people of Austin, Texas were reeling in shock from a seemingly endless string of brutal murders. Each murder took place while the victims were in the so-called safety of their own beds. The Servant Girl Annihilator's name was devised by writer O. Henry in a letter penned to a friend, remarking, quote, "Town is fearfully dull, except for the frequent raids of the Servant Girl Annihilators, who make things lively in the dull hours of the night."
She was dragged outside and the job was finished out in the yard.
Well, that's one way to discuss an axe murderer.
Wendy, I'm home.
The murders ended suddenly on Christmas Eve 1885. Some believe they only stopped as he boarded a ship to begin his reign of terror elsewhere.
I promise I will kill again.
Number 5. The Oakland County Killer, also known as the babysitter. The loss of a child is every parent's worst nightmare. Over the course of about a year in the late 1970s, 2 boys and 2 girls went missing in Oakland County, Michigan. Their bodies were later discovered in public areas.
They didn't cry until I left them.
These crimes led to the largest murder investigation in U.S. history up to that time. Several witnesses came forward, but provided no concrete leads. One witness claimed to have seen one of the boys talk to a man in a blue AMC Gremlin, prompting investigators to inquire after every Gremlin owner in the county.
If he was involved, he should have been in jail and he shouldn't have been out the night Timmy was abducted.
But answers about the killer, or killers, remain elusive.
Is that good enough for the family? No, it's not.
Number 4. Charlie Chopoff. This vicious killer was known for targeting African-American boys exclusively. He earned his ghoulish moniker from the brutal injuries he would inflict upon his victims. One of Charlie's victims did, however, survive his attack, and in 1974, police apprehended a suspect, Erno Soto. Caught in the act of kidnapping a Puerto Rican boy, Soto was brought in for questioning. The surviving boy said he thought he looked like his attacker, but he couldn't be sure.
Give me an answer. How about him?
Despite confessing to one of the murders, the Manhattan State Hospital, a psychiatric institution at which Soto was a patient, claimed Soto could not be guilty, but did say it was possible he could have slipped out on their watch. Number 3. The Long Island Serial Killer, also known as the Craigslist Ripper. This killer's been at it a while. In 2010, a police dog in training located the first body. It wasn't long before investigators found more in the area, alerting them to the possibility of a serial killer. As the area was probed further, bits and pieces of bodies were found up and down Gilgo Beach in Suffolk County, New York. All of the victims, disposed of over a 20-year period, were associated with the sex trade, several of them soliciting services over Craigslist. Almost nothing is known about this killer, except that he is morbidly prolific. The investigation is ongoing.
There are thousands of exploited servers on the internet, so he's not going to run out of victims anytime soon.
Number 2, Jack the Ripper.
You are going to bring out Jack the Ripper.
One of the most notorious cases in history, this unidentified serial killer sent the Whitechapel district of London into a panic in the late Victorian era, after a series of ghastly murders was uncovered. It's hard to think of another killer who's inspired as much lore, research, or as many theories over his identity. In part because of the extreme brutality of the killings and the taunts the killer sent the frustrated police, his name has taken on an almost fabled aspect.
So, Jack the Ripper isn't just merely killing whores. He's executing traitors.
The most famous tease came in the form of the From Hell letter, which was sent with half the kidney of one of his victims. He claimed to have eaten the other half. Before we name our number 1 pick, here are some dishonorable mentions. The Alphabet Killer. Victims united by alliteration.
Your Castillo murder case.
Yeah. If 2% of the population have matching first and last initials, what are the chances that Carla Castillo would be dumped in a town that started with the letter C?
The Cleveland Torso Murderer. Dismembered drifters. The Axeman of New Orleans. Breaking, entering, and axing. Stone Man. Stalked the homeless population in Calcutta. The Honolulu Strangler. Hawaii's first serial killer.
And he's an individual who may be at this particular juncture experiencing marital or girlfriend problems.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1, the Zodiac Killer.
I'm not the Zodiac.
Undoubtedly the most elusive killer in American history, the Zodiac Killer is like something straight out of a Hollywood nightmare. Also one to pen letters to the police. He did so by way of puzzles and complex cryptograms, boasting about his feats and demanding that his letters be published on page 1 of the newspapers, or else the body count would rise. This killer would hunt his victims, usually young couples in secluded areas, before carrying out his work. Similarities in method and physical description have led some to postulate that the Zodiac and Phantom Killer may be one and the same. Regardless, the Zodiac has left a grisly legacy all his own.
This man was a terrorist, and a terrorist that was American grown.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.